listeners as well. I'm Kunzir Jiwa, and I am a researcher and managing editor at the African Legal Information Institute based in South Africa. I also do a lot of other things, but you can listen to that on Develo's podcast. And yeah, that's it on my side.
Wonderful. Thank you. I think you're still on mute. We can't hear Muchengeti. Yeah, I think, okay, Melissa can introduce herself in the meantime.
All right, thank you. First of all, I'd just like to thank you, Buzz, for having us ASRM on your platform and, like we mentioned before, giving us the mic. My name is Melissa Kububa. I'm a project finance lawyer who specializes in trade and investment with clients across Africa, Asia, and Europe. And I'm also the founder and lead career consultant at the Career Warehouse.
Thank you. Nice. And then who is next? I think, who else is in your team, Melissa?
We have, I can't seem to see him at the moment. Let me just quickly open. We have Diamond, but I'm not too sure whether he's joined in, and obviously Chengeti. Brilliant.
Is Diamond here?
I can't seem to see him on. No, I don't think so.
Muchengeti, is your sound back? It's not bad.
No.
I think he must go out, then come back in.
Yeah.
Okay, I think in the meantime, we can just proceed with some of the conversation. Melissa, seeing as you were the last to introduce yourself, can you just tell us a little bit about who you are, and especially relating to where you come from, and why did you decide to look into pursuing your LLB qualification in South Africa?
All right, brilliant. So I forgot to actually mention that in ASRM, I am the chair lady of ASRM, and Muchengeti is the founder, but he'll be able to introduce the coalition a bit more when he comes back.
Wonderful.
So just a bit of background on me. I am Zimbabwean, and I actually didn't obtain my LLB qualification in South Africa. I studied in London, but I have decided to come to South Africa because I recently got married. So in a nutshell, you could say I moved for love. But yeah, that's a bit about me. Yeah.
Okay. And what are the challenges you then faced when you made the move from London to South Africa? And with your qualification from London, would you have been able to pursue admission in Zimbabwe?
Okay, so actually I moved from London to Zimbabwe, and I managed to pursue my qualification as a Zimbabwean qualified lawyer. So I am a qualified lawyer in Zimbabwe. And just to draw parallels, the move from being English qualified or English trained and coming to Zimbabwe was quite easy. And it's the same for other nationals who come to Zimbabwe. You just have to write what we call conversion exams, which are bar exams, and then you qualify, which I think is very similar with England too. I think for me, transitioning to South Africa, I've actually just recently moved to South Africa. I moved in March. I think the challenge, and we'll speak a bit more about it as we go on in the conversation, is just the requirement from the RPA, or should I say the exclusion of you either having to be a permanent resident or a South African citizen for you to qualify, which then trickles down to all of the law firms, big or small, having that requirement. So therefore, you're not able to practice as an attorney in South Africa, and you have to settle for, either settling for passion projects or other research jobs. You won't be able to particularly practice as an admitted attorney.
Okay, thank you for that. Muchengeti, do you have sound now? I don't know what the sound is. Can you, I don't know, does anyone know
how to maybe
help him?
Yes, what's up now?
We've got sound now.
Okay, I've just switched to my cell phone. Is that better?
Yes, thank you. Please introduce yourself and the coalition in a minute.
Great, thanks a lot. Yeah, So my name is Muchengeti Wacha. I'm the executive director of the Asylum Seeker, Refugee and Migrant ASRM Coalition, as well as a candidate attorney at Libya Inc. Incorporated. Now, the coalition is essentially an assemblage of migrants who work in various spaces within the legal industry, so academics, students, graduates, and we've essentially coalesced to combat the discrimination that we are finding within the profession. We think that as a
Oh, we seem to have lost you again. Can you try switching off your video and then pick up from as a coalition you? Yeah.
Sorry, I lost it. Can you repeat that?
Yes, so we lost you for a bit. Can you pick up with from what you do as a coalition? You said it's members from academics, lawyers, and so forth.
Yes, so we're an assemblage of migrants working within the legal industry value chain. So we are academics, students, graduates, legal practitioners, and we've essentially coalesced to fight discrimination within the profession against non-citizens. That's the coalition in a nutshell.
Okay, you mentioned that you're a candidate attorney. Are you able to tell us how you managed to secure articles, notwithstanding the challenges that most foreign LLB graduates face?
So look, it's honestly been quite an arduous journey for me to get here. I only recently secured articles earlier this month. And essentially, my employer has, taken a leap of faith in me. Us coalition, and I'll discuss this in due course, intend to challenge the legislative impediment on non-citizens without permanent residence from being admitted into the adoption. So my employer has taken a leap of faith. He believes we'll be successful in that court challenge, and hopefully then I will be able to be admitted. But in the way in which they engaged me is that essentially they understood the plight, I guess, that non-citizens without permanent residence are going through. And they looked at my CV and determined that among the candidates who applied, I was the most qualified and the most ready to take on the position.
Okay, and your employer is South African. They're a South African citizen. They're not part.
Indeed, yes. My employers are South African citizens. Let me just repeat that.
Yeah, they're not part of ASRM, correct?
Indeed, then they are not part of the ASRM coalition.
Okay, and then the one question I asked Melissa, which I didn't ask you, is why did you choose to pursue your LLB qualification in South Africa?
So look, South Africa is arguably the economic hub of Africa. So it's always going to attract, the best talent, students, etc. But my own personal journey is that I initially wanted to go to the University of Manchester. However, their intake is in September, whereas the South African university intakes are in January, February. And the long and short of it is my lawyer father didn't want me lounging around the house until September. So He decided that I should apply to some universities and see where I get in there. So that's my personal journey. But yes, as I said, look, South Africa is the hub of Africa. And even if we look at sort of educational institutions, they are the leaders. And so you're going to attract people who want to follow in that footstep and give themselves the best leg up in this profession.
Thank you. Tanvia, over to you. For people who haven't had an opportunity to listen to the podcast, even though I've asked them to, can you repeat to us why you decided to pursue your LLB qualification in South Africa?
So I think, as Muchengeti has said, and what a lot of international students might actually relate to is that we intended to pursue our law degree either in the country or outside, and most of the time outside for various reasons, as many international students do. And at the time, as is popular in Zimbabwe, and from anyone who doesn't know, I am from Mauritius. It's also very popular in Mauritius to go study in the UK. And unfortunately, in the UK, the funds you would need to study are extremely high. And it's not something that at the time I thought would be sustainable for my parents, given the fact that there was two of us. And I looked at other countries, and South Africa's law degree seemed very interesting. And I think something that's important to highlight, which later on maybe we can talk about more, is the fact that I doubt many of us were told that you couldn't practice law in South Africa despite having an LLB degree, because I don't remember being told that at all. And I know many other international friends who also didn't know about this caveat. But returning to the question, essentially, it's just that the curriculum offered in South Africa and just your rich journey when it comes to the law, especially public interest law, was very interesting to me. And that's why I decided to come to South Africa.
Thank you. I think it's very important that you mentioned that you didn't know. So essentially they took your application fee, or the university took your application fee, took your registration fee, and everybody failed to sort of give you the fine print. Just to open up the conversation to our panelists, you are more than welcome to butt in when you have an opportunity to, if your thought process is on whatever somebody else is speaking about. But collectively, when did you find out that you can't now practice in South Africa? Was it when you were in your final year of studies, or was it when you started job hunting and found that all your applications are being turned down? Or did someone older than you who had finished school before you make you aware of the requirements and the formalities for entering into the legal profession? My understanding is that it's not an industry specific rule, but generally applies across the board in terms of foreign citizens.
If I can take that question first, it actually touches on something that I wanted to say, and I think I've mentioned this in the podcast before. It's not so, it is very much the case that we were not told, but I've raised this with the University of Cape Town, where I am an alumni currently, and also student, is the fact that apparently there's a little disclaimer on the website when you're applying, and something that's not really, our attention wasn't really drawn to that, and that probably is a material aspect in contract law, but that's something else for another day. But essentially, I only found out that I wasn't allowed to practice in South Africa. And this is probably the wrong terminology, but I'm sure Mchengeti and Melissa will speak on this more later. But I found out when, after a while, all my applications were getting rejected, but there was no reason as to why I was getting rejected. So I think I had mentioned this before. There was a lot of self-doubt where I was just genuinely thinking that I must not be properly qualified. And then later on, I was talking to other friends who are from Kenya and other countries outside of South Africa, and I was told that, well, actually, they aren't taking you because they are not willing to take on the process of what it would mean to sponsor you to stay here. And even that was actually factually incorrect, because as Mchengeti will touch on probably later, there are different hurdles that you need to pass when you want to practice in South Africa. There are a lot of firms that are not willing to sign you as a candidate attorney because you won't be allowed to later on practice as an attorney. And there are some specifications to when you register as an attorney. For example, court appearances and so on are something that are sometimes specific upon your citizenship in South Africa and permanent residency. I know when you want to apply for pupillage and join the bar, you either need to have a permanent residency or be a citizen of South Africa. So yeah, it is something that I found out through friends who let me know about the same thing. And also when I applied for an interview and I got to the final round and everything was great, and then I got a call asking me, so what visa are you on? And then the moment I said a study visa, I kind of already knew that this is not going anywhere anymore. And I got the call where the firm was quite kind in telling me that we're really sorry. We weren't aware that you're a foreigner who's on a study visa and you were our best candidate, but we can't take this further. And to a certain extent, it is industry specific. And again, I think this is something that the coalition will touch on a bit more later, in sense that in general, when you apply for a work permit, you require an affidavit that says that you are the only qualified person to do this job. In terms of there are no other South Africans who have applied to do this job that are adequately qualified, which is almost impossible in and of itself, right? As a graduate of chemical engineering, it's almost impossible to apply to a job and not have another South African with a chemical engineering degree. That being said, there's the additional caveat in the legal industry, which sometimes requires you to be a citizen or a permanent resident to appear in court or to register for pupillage.
Sure, thank you for that, Tanvia. On that note, Muchengeti has his hand up and he'd like to add something.
Yeah, great. Thanks for the floor. Let me just start with just a little bit of a correction. So one doesn't need to be a permanent resident or citizen to appear in court necessarily. So what you'll find is, for example, myself as a candidate attorney who does not have permanent residence, I'm able to appear in both the district and regional court on the strength of my employment as a candidate attorney. The only impediment comes at the point of admission, when I want to from being a candidate attorney to being a full attorney, or for being a pupil to being a full advocate. That is where there's a legislative impediment, and it just touches on a little bit of this question of rationality, that if one can be allowed to represent clients in our courts and defend rights, etc., then why is it that at the point of admission we are then barred? So that speaks to a little bit of the question of the rationale of these legislative impediments. And then I just like to touch on the issue of when did I realize, or when do many students realize that they cannot proceed in the profession if they're not permanent residents or citizens. For me, it happened during an open day, or careers day rather. All the large firms come, and many of you who are in university or university graduates will understand that is a very exciting time for graduates, or for students rather. It almost gives you more energy to continue pushing in your studies. And when we were engaging with the recruiters, we were asked, of course, are you South African or not? And once they determine the kind of visa type that you're on, you essentially said that they essentially tell you that, look, we can't take you because of this legislative impediment. So I think you can imagine how disheartening that is for a young student who is sort of trying to motivate themselves to push themselves over the edge of an LLB, which is difficult in and of itself. And then I just wanted to quickly touch on the issue of other professions. So our research as the coalition has determined that there aren't any other professions that implement similar requirements in South Africa, excluding the private security industry. And even in the private security industry, there is an easy exemption procedure that non-citizens can go through in order to sort of be licensed in that profession. So then again, speaks to this issue of rationality that we're concerned about, that, if every other profession is allowed to sort of fulfill their full potential, why not the law? And some have said, of course, the law is a more important profession than others, and we sort of think that's true. But the public trust that lawyers have is the same as chartered accountants, the same as accountants, the same as doctors. So it again speaks to this issue of rationality, that why is it that law is the only profession that has such a stringent impediment? I think maybe let me hand over to Melissa to also chime in with her comments.
Thank you, Chengeti. And for me, it's just to reiterate what both Taniba and Muchengeti has said, that again, because my circumstance is slightly different, because obviously I obtained my graduate degree in London and then I moved here afterwards. So to answer your question, I was aware of the exclusion. But I think as I'm trying to apply for my master's, even a master's in law in South Africa, again, like what Taniva says, they take our application, but no one lets you fully aware that you will not be able to use this qualification within this country. So then you're stuck between a rock and a hard place, because obviously people come to South Africa because you've got great educational facilities. However, we won't be able to use it. And also to just touch on the point of other professions, I totally agree with Muchengeti, and obviously from the research we've done as a coalition, the other professions, bar private security, do allow foreign citizens to come in and to work, bar there are some exceptions and some of qualifications you do need to additionally get. I think it's significantly easier for any other profession other than the legal profession.
Thank you. So I think we skipped a step in addressing the challenges specific to once you're a graduate and while you are awaiting admission and while you're awaiting permanent residency. So can I just rewind back to the actual campus life, opening the question to the panelists? Melissa, I believe your campus experience was definitely different to Muchengeti's. But just to ask this question, I'll take Diana's question now. I see she's got her hand up. And this question is specifically open to anybody who would like to just share their own experience. Please do raise your hand and I'll give you an opportunity to answer this question. But how was your campus life with regards to the moments when xenophobia attacks were rife? Do you find that that also affected your campus life and your access to education, your access to your legal studies? And even if you're not a law graduate, but you tuned in, how did the bigger effects of xenophobia affect you and your studies? I really want to be ambitious in saying that Tanvia's experience with regards to xenophobia may have been slightly different to a Black African's experience, purely because of the color of her skin and the texture of her hair. So maybe she wasn't directly affected, but from her podcast, she's mentioned that she was friends with other Black Africans who were probably affected. Can somebody just shed light on that specific experience?
Maybe let me come in here, Tebelo. Oh, sorry, is someone else coming? Let me yield.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to touch on that basis, Tebelo, and I will hand over to Muchengeti soon. I've been quite vocal about this. My experience of xenophobia was nothing compared to what my other Black African friends have faced so far, mostly because I don't think I come across as a foreigner, but even as a foreigner, I think there are types of foreigners that are approved of in South Africa and types of foreigners that are not approved of. I think you touched on my skin color, my hair texture, maybe even my accent. I don't think I've come across as one of these unwanted foreigners. So I think my experience of campus life with regards to xenophobia and xenophobic attacks was much more unencumbered by these attacks and protests. So I will definitely hang over to Muchengeti now. But just to highlight that you're absolutely right. I don't think I was even remotely impacted by protests and so on. Yes, in other ways, in systematic xenophobia, yes, but not so much by outward xenophobic attacks.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks a lot, Tanvia. I'm hoping Tapiwa Diamond can join us in this conversation if he's not already here, because he is also going to touch on this issue quite extensively. But let me speak to my own experiences, and it honestly was one of the sort of turning points in my life. I was at UKZN when there was a significant outbreak of xenophobic violence in the province. And at a sort of place that we often frequent, they killed 2 Malawians, if I'm not mistaken. And, we were almost in the vicinity the previous day. So we very much felt, myself and my cohort of friends, that it could have been us. We sort of speak our language Shona quite openly, without any reservation, and sort of we're identifiably Zimbabwean, even to the extent that as you go further north in Africa, the skin shades are a little bit darker, or that's the perception anyway. And so it was essentially a turning point in my life where, to be quite frank with you, I've otherwise lived a relatively privileged life. But in this circumstance, I realized that, even my privilege couldn't insulate me from, xenophobia. And I think it's also important for me to give kudos to the University of KwaZulu-Natal, whose community sort of rallied around us. And, we had a significant protest against xenophobia during that time. But, you can just imagine how this affected people's studies, people's psyches. And like I said, I was myself personally affected by that issue. But just to speak again on the community of UKZN, I did not feel at all excluded from the university or the university community. They essentially did not see me as Zimbabwean, but just as another student. But it was the things that were outside in the society that we live that really sort of began to affect us psychologically. So that would be my experience with sort of xenophobia on campus.
Sure, thank you. Diana, you had your hand up. Diana, if you're still on, please do unmute and put forth your comment.
Okay, hi Tibula. Yes, I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
Okay, great. My comment at the time that I raised my hand was around the rationality of the permanent residency requirement. And I just wanted to take that to the very origin. So my experience was I did my LLB at Rhodes University around about 2014 when the law changed, making it much more difficult for a foreign national to obtain a general work permit, because you could have a general work permit for 5 years and then, work towards renewing it and eventually getting your PR. That changed, and then there was great reluctancy from firms to onboard candidate attorneys that were foreigners. But what you find is if you find an employer that's willing to take a chance on you and, wait out your visa issues, and they are there, few and far between, but you can be lucky enough. You do not need permanent residency or even a work permit to register your articles. They don't ask for a work permit. They don't ask for a work permit or permanent residency for you to write board exams. Meanwhile, you're paying as you go along. At that very critical time when you complete articles, you've completed your board exams, you have your LLB, obviously, all of a sudden this permanent residency becomes the be-all and the end-all requirement for you to become an admitted attorney. And what that then does is I then had to go back to Zimbabwe, where I worked as a legal intern, unpaid, because I hadn't written my conversion exams in Zimbabwe, which at the time I couldn't afford to write because I wasn't getting paid. So if you have the money and if you can afford to write them, you write them, you pass, and you hopefully progress. But there's no reason why, if you've been trained in South Africa, you have your degree here, and the PR is not required for any of the preliminary steps, that it becomes the only reason why you can't get admitted. And it becomes such a hindrance because now you're thinking, okay, so what am I going to do? And even to try and go to another jurisdiction, some places say, okay, you need to be admitted in the country where you obtained your degree. So that was just my comment, that it has far-reaching consequences and impact. And if I had known at the time that I applied in first year, I would have focused my attention on going overseas.
Yeah.
If I'd known. Well, I didn't, and that's what I'm now trying to do. And you find that, for example, in University of Toronto, they're very open on their website about, the potential hurdles and career paths and courses that you need to do if you're a foreign trained lawyer, which I wish our South African universities would do.
So where are you from, Diana?
I'm from Zimbabwe.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. just out of curiosity, why don't we have this conversion exam that other countries seem to have in place? Is there an origin for that?
So what I've seen and experienced is if you don't have a South African law degree, you sort of have to start your LLB in South Africa. I'm not sure why that's the case. In Zim, they recognize that there are similarities in the laws between South Africa and Zimbabwe. So it's not necessary to make that a complete bar for a Zimbabwean national to be able to then practice. So the conversion exams are welcome. It's just sometimes you'd also have to look at the pricing and the costing of it, because if you're an unpaid intern, now you're trying to raise money for conversion exams and you still have student debt that you have to pay off, it can be a very harrowing and thankless experience. And for me, I ended up writing those conversion exams after I came back, just as a backup plan in case I need to go back home and I need to practice, and it is home at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. So thank you for sharing. Tanvir?
Sorry, I just wanted to also touch on that. Thank you so much, Diana, for sharing your experience. I think your last remark about the conversion exam also touches on the fact that the South African LLB is quite peculiar when it comes to Roman Dutch law, which I think makes it even more of a question to me. Why wouldn't you allow an LLB holder in South Africa to practice in South Africa? Because there is no reason why a Roman Dutch LLB holder would be able to go to another country and practice with that same degree. There are almost no countries where Roman Dutch law is currently practiced. And I think it also highlights the irrationality in what Diana mentioned, taking the money for the degree, taking the money for the board exam, getting you signed on as a candidate attorney. And then when the time comes for the admission part, then suddenly there's a hurdle as to whether you can register because you're not a permanent resident. I mean, Mutengeti also touched on the fact that he struggled to even secure articles to start off with. And that's kind of the hurdle that I had, because I was told that, yeah, sure, you don't need a visa for you to work now other than a work visa, which you can secure on your own. But we don't want to hire you for articles because we need someone who can later on stay as an attorney. And what's the point of investing in a candidate attorney who won't be able to then be admitted as an attorney? It makes no sense to have an article clerk for 2 years who won't be able to later on stay as an attorney and take other cases. Again, highlighting the irrationality that Mutengeti mentioned in terms of allowing you to represent people while you're a CA, but then suddenly you're not allowed to anymore because you can't be admitted.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. The job, for example, you are more than welcome to share your own experiences as South Africans. But before we got cut off, Tanvir was just telling us about how it doesn't make sense for a law firm to allow foreign students to take on articles only for them not to be able to be admitted, which for me is very weird, because from the number of law firms that I've worked with and the law firms that my own friends have worked for and my own colleagues have worked for, firms always seem to want a continuity plan. So if you tell a firm that, for example, at an interview, if you state, no, I just want to do my articles so that I can be admitted, the chances of you being kept for that job are very, very slim, or rather weaker than somebody who actually has a continuity plan to say, I want to work at this top 5 law firm. I have a 5 to 10 year plan to be here. I really do want to earn my stripes. I want to do my 2 years of articles. I want to write my board exams. I want to be retained as an associate. I want to be promoted to senior and then director. Firms are really in love with the story of somebody who wants to actually have a long-term plan at the firm. So why take on a foreign national if you know that they're going to have that barrier to admission? I'm not sure if that was a question. I think it was a comment. If anyone has anything to add. Please remember to unmute.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, who is speaking?
It's Jackie.
Hi, Jackie. Yes, Jackie.
I just wanted to share hi. I just wanted to share my experience. So I've been in South Africa since 2004. I went to primary school here. I went to high school here. Did my LLB here. Doing my masters here. So it also just confuses me how I've basically invested all of my life to South Africa, but even that is not seen as as an exemption or anything like that. So just going back to the rationality factor of it all, it doesn't make sense for me, who's someone who all I know is I have my national senior certificate, I have my LLB from here, so it doesn't make sense for me to go and utilize any of that in any other parts of the world. Even got to a point where when I did graduate, because I couldn't get a job here, I had to go back home and did law school there, and then I'm now an advocate in Tanzania. But then on top of that, still, I am way more, my qualifications are way more, like what Tanvir was saying, Roman Dutch law, that's where my front is at. So yeah, I just wanted to touch on that and just basically give my input on how none of this really makes sense. And we have conversations about it, we talk about our struggles, but at the end of the day, like even with companies, how they just say, like there's nothing we can do to help you, unfortunately. So yeah, it is kind of disheartening, but there are people working in South Africa. So I guess that's what keeps us going. There is sort of a chance of us being able to work here. So yeah.
Sure. Thank you for sharing, Jackie. I just got notification that Diamond is here. Diamond is also from the ASRM Coalition. If he is indeed on, can we please just give him an opportunity to introduce himself and tell us why he decided to pursue a LLB degree in South Africa?
Good afternoon. How are you? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. My name is Chajga Tapiwa Diamond. I hail from Rhodesia, Zimbabwe. The reason why I chose to study law and to come into South Africa was primarily because of the political situation in Zimbabwe, because my father was a member of the opposition party, and that did affect us in terms of the violence and the like from the year 2000, because he was from Mashonaland West and there was a lot of violence. So we moved from Zimbabwe and came into South Africa. But the challenges that I have faced in South Africa, as soon as you get into South Africa, number one, you face challenges as a migrant. Number two, if over and above that, if you do a LLB degree, you're going to meet a lot of administrative red flags along the way. I personally have had issues in terms of the registration of articles. After the registration of articles, that was then, you then get to know now, somewhere halfway through your degree, that you actually need permanent resident status for you to be able to be admitted in the Republic of South Africa. That is despite your intention to say, I've studied the 4 years already, and in that 4 years I've done articles past. That on its own shows intention that someone wants to stay in the Republic, and it is just a mere qualification that will help you to do the things that you would have been doing as a candidate attorney. What you find out, speaking of the rationality of the rules and the regulations of the practice, you do your articles. I take it to say you have your learner's license. You're allowed to go to court. You represent clients, even in the regional court, with the right of appearance after the 6-month period. And when you finish everything, the then says, no, you have passed your license, but you cannot drive a vehicle. So that on its own tells you that the law has not been challenged, and it gives an opportunity for us to join hands and challenge the status quo, primarily because I don't see the rationality behind saying you need now, if you are going to represent people, you need to have permanent residence. When you have your articles, when you're doing your articles, you are allowed to go to court, even sit in the High Court, even go and sit in the highest court. So the rationality test, it does not pass it, it misses it. And people then, us as migrants, we then get susceptible to unscrupulous practices where people come to you and say, I'm able to assist you with a permanent residence, I can assist you with that. People end up losing quite a lot of money. I also do immigration law, and I can tell you, almost 70-80% of the migrant community, not just those who are doing law, but whoever says they've got permanent resident status, half of them, or even more than half of them, are illegal. They are not in the system because they've fallen now prey to unscrupulous agents who say they are able to do it. That is just besides the frustrations of the salaries that you get when you're doing your articles. You get not a salary, it's a stipend. You get paid next to nothing. You still have to make means of going to work. That is also besides the fact that they say you should have a car, you should be able to speak these certain languages for you to be in the system. So it does create room for us to challenge it. So I appreciate for us joining hands. I appreciate the efforts that have been put into this machinery so as to change the law for the betterment of the migrant community, for the betterment of the practice as well.
Thank you for that, Chadia. I do have Diana's hand is raised. Diana and then Muchengeti, please do.
Okay. I'll make it quick. I just wanted to talk about a potential, well, it's not a solution really, but a way you can get around it that I found worked for me. And for any law graduates, well, first years or impending law graduates or siblings or whoever's listening, it's become even more important now to, if South Africa is your long-term goal, to get an undergrad in something other than just the LLB. So I did a BCom law, not because I was wise, but because my parents wanted me to be a chartered accountant. Halfway through, I was like dropping accounting, then settled for information systems, economics, that kind of thing. So I then got a BCom LLB. But my heart and my love and my passion was always pursue the LLB. But because I struggled to get articles initially, I, however, was able to get a job offer from a company that was willing to take me on as a graduate business analyst, And then you go to the critical skills visa, and a business analyst is something that you can apply for. So if you apply for that, you'll still have to register with a particular board, they evaluate your qualifications, etc. But the fact that I had these other IT subjects in addition to the law helped. Yeah. So you get your 5-year critical skills visa. As soon as you get it, you're eligible to apply for permanent residency, and then you get your permanent residency and you can move on. My permanent residency is still pending. That's a fight for another day. But I know for some people where that has worked, they've got the permanent residency, they've worked in that particular field maybe for a year or two and gone back to the law and gotten admitted. So until we're able to successfully challenge the rationality behind that law, you have to get creative about ways around how can I legally stay in the system and work towards my passion if you have decided that South Africa is where you want to call home.
Thank you for that, Diana. We haven't heard from Melissa in a while, so can Melissa quickly intercept and then we'll take Muchengeti's comment.
Okay, thank you very much, Thibela. I'll start by commenting on Diamond's contribution and then head over to Diana's. And I just wanted to touch on the issue that Diamond spoke about, and I suppose this delves into additional hurdles you face other than you having to be a permanent resident. For example, you having to have a driver's license. Now in South Africa, you cannot get a driver's license unless you're a permanent resident. Again, another hurdle foreigners face. Another hurdle that is faced, and it's not just for foreigners, and I think this is why it's so important for both South Africans and non-South Africans to be part of this conversation. Now, I don't know if you've noticed, but a lot of these big firms actually require candidate attorneys to own their own cars. Now, that in itself is very exclusionary because not every student is going to have access to a car. That purely states that students who come from a higher socioeconomic background are the ones who are willing to admit into candidate attorney positions because you need to be able to have a car. And it speaks to where does the buck stop, where does the exclusion stop? Now, going into what Diana spoke about the various ways in which you can be creative and, try get employed or try reroute to South Africa. I think the majority of us in this roundtable have already obtained their LLB degrees. So while it is very useful information, I think it's very useful information for students who are thinking about applying for LLBs or graduate positions in South Africa, we're left with a huge population of people who already went through the system, already have degrees. And I think why the coalition is there is to really fight it. Someone mentioned about how we come and we have these discussions among ourselves and nothing happens and nothing changes. And this is why the coalition, one of the reasons why we're here is to fight that, what we would call unconstitutional provision, the discrimination against that. That shouldn't be the case. In England, you don't have to be a citizen. In Zimbabwe, you don't have to be a citizen. In America, you don't have to be a citizen. Why is it that in South Africa you do? And I think it shows a bigger problem within South Africa and the continent as a whole. We're excluding essentially other Africans from participating in the legal profession, because English qualified lawyers and American qualified lawyers can easily come to South Africa, go into one of the big firms, and they're called directors and they're still practicing. However, the exclusion affects someone from Malawi, someone from Mauritius, someone from Zimbabwe, where you may not necessarily have the connections to the big law firms, and that exclusion affects you. So I think it speaks to a greater problem that the continent as a whole is facing. You know, we know the saying, united we stand, divided we fall. And I think this is a clear representation of division within the continent, which will lead to or continue our falling as a continent. So that's just my contribution on the points raised.
Sure. Thank you, Melissa. Muchengeti, if you can just place your comment in 2 minutes, and then I'd really just like to do 2 minutes of, just the constitutionality of the provisions in place, because Melissa did touch on that. So if you can just wrap it up for us, we've got about 5 minutes left.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks a lot, Tebelo. I want to just state categorically that, look, the coalition, above and beyond fighting discrimination against non-citizens, is committed to fighting discrimination in all its forms in the legal profession. We commented to the PC regarding the issue of ownership of a car and a license. We were in support of South Africans in that regard. I also just want to represent the position of people who haven't had a platform speak here, and that of South African citizens who feel aggrieved by the conversation we're having. There are already a significant amount of protections for the employment of citizens, more especially in the Immigration Act, which limits the number of visas that are given to non-citizens, as well as the Employment Act, which, as Tanvir spoke about, requires an employer to go to the Department of Labor to determine whether there isn't a South African who can fill the position, etc. So those are just the positions that I'm sort of defending those who feel aggrieved by the conversation that we're having. Additionally, what we found is this impediment, this legislative impediment, is actually an affront to South Africa's commitments under international trade law. So with the World Trade Organization. And the result of that is that investment into the legal fraternity from outside the country is actually being blocked. This is information not from us as the coalition, but people can look at the research by the Trade Center in Stellenbosch. Essentially, they're saying that more investment flow into the legal industry if there wasn't this impediment. So as a matter of fact, we're shooting ourselves in the foot as a country by blocking foreign nationals. Now, quickly, whilst I still have time, I'd like to touch on a very important thing about the history of this exclusion. So what happened in the 1950s is that Black lawyers like Tambo and Mandela started to sort of assert their rights. And in response to that, the apartheid government, one, stripped them of their citizenship, making them citizens of the homelands. Two, implemented this requirement of permanent residence in order to block them from the profession. So the exclusion is sort of rooted in a deep and divisive history of South Africa. And, for the Legal Practice Council and the law profession at this stage in 2020 to continue to to continue to be proponents of it is deeply concerning and should be deeply concerning for everyone who's in this country. And then quickly about international issues. So as Melissa touched on, America, the UK, and various other jurisdictions do not implement these kind of restrictions. And I'd like to just bring it home. The most of the SADC region doesn't either. There are only maybe 2 countries that do, South Africa included. And essentially, as a coalition, we're looking to have challenged these type of discriminatory laws across the SADC region, because ultimately we think the practice of law is going to be largely transnational, and people need to be able to freely move and work as they wish. One last quick point is a lot of these big firms are already moving into African jurisdictions. So you'll find Bauman's has an office in Kenya. You'll find that Weber is an association, a firm in Namibia. So the South African profession is
Sorry, I think this kicked me.
All right, can you guys hear me?
Yes, this kicked me out, but you were saying that the South African profession, is already trans-border. Yeah.
Great. Yes, that was my last point. That all the major law firms are already in association with firms in Kenya, firms in Namibia, so they're benefiting from being able to practice in those jurisdictions, but remaining protectionist about their own. That was the last point that I made.
Sure. Thank you for that. Thank you. We also had a question from the floor. Tandiwe earlier on asked if non-South Africans are allowed to work in.
Hi, everyone. Can you still hear me? Maybe give me a thumbs up in the chat.
Oh, yes, we heard you.
Oh, sorry.
So we had a question earlier that said, can non-South Africans work in a company in-house as in-house legal? They obviously wouldn't need to be admitted. So can they work, an example, for Telkom, Eskom in their legal division?
Indeed, yes, they would be able to work as in-house lawyers. The issue is admission. So being able to make representations in front of a court, being able to sign for court papers, etc.
Okay, wonderful. Then I have a question from Faye. She says, as a general question, could the relaxation of the permanent residency requirement for current students and graduates perhaps lead to stricter provisions for admission of prospective foreign students, perhaps in an attempt to maintain that balance in favor of SA citizens? This is present greatly in medicine and could be another risky consequence for the SA legal fraternity. The question is up in the chat box if anybody wants.
So I think our opinion to that would be, sorry about that. So I think our opinion on that would be that any restrictions that these South African jurisdiction wants to impose just have to be done in a manner that's legal, right? The restrictions on medicine are done in an effort to combat brain drain. To have, for example, too many Malian lawyer doctors, in SA, practicing in SA. That's a problem that's unique to the medical profession. We don't necessarily have that in the legal profession. So I don't think that there's a risk there. Would be our submissions.
Okay, Chadia has a comment, Diamond, and then Tanvia, and then Tatenda would like to add on to the question about in-house. So Diamond, Tanvia, then Tatenda. Diamond, please unmute.
Okay, thank you very much. I just wanted to add on the aspect of it. Can you hear me? Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to add on the last question. If we go into the accounting fraternity, accounting and auditing, the moment a person finishes their articles and their board exams, they automatically qualify to apply, and they are given permanent resident status before they even get employment. So if we look at the rationality of how it is happening in the legal fraternity, it's different based on how it is happening in another profession, which is the accounting and auditing profession, where you get your permanent resident status before you even get work. So we can use that as a precedent to say, no, it would not cause any harm. It also would not cause any strict limitations when it comes to the admission, and it won't cause any prejudice to the local South Africans, primarily because the legal field is very wide. So I think it wouldn't cause much based on what the auditing field is already doing.
Thank you. Tanvia?
Sorry, it was just something that I wanted to add on, and maybe less of an empirical answer, but rather the fact that I think a part of what a lot of people don't understand is that international students bring in a lot of money to universities in South Africa. So it's always something to bear in mind when we draw pretty wide speculation in almost, I think, in fear of what the coalition is trying to do here. Because like Diamond has said, there are many other professions where foreigners are allowed to work and obtain permanent residency as a result of that. For example, this is not a professional thing, but you may apply straight away after obtaining your PhD for a permanent residency, and you will obtain it. But that hasn't stopped the intake of PhD students, because universities need not only the money, but the expertise. So it's always something to bear in mind that adds to the irrationality behind the exclusion of non-citizens in the
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Tanvia. Then Tatenda had a comment with regard to in-house attorneys or in-house legal advisors.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity. Basically, what I wanted to add is while working for certain companies as an in-house legal person, whilst there is an actual impediment in terms of the rules, you'll find that 95% of the times, if there's an opportunity where a legal advisor is required, you actually have to be a person who is post-admission. So if you're not admitted as an attorney, you don't qualify, because the requirement could be, for example, we're looking for someone with 3 years post-admission experience. If you don't have the certificate of admission, it means that you basically do not qualify. I always use an example of driving. You are basically a driver who can drive, and only those people that have seen you drive will understand how much you can do. But if you don't have the certificate that says you're an admitted attorney, then maybe automatically already disqualified if there are many, many candidates that are applying. That's all I wanted to add. Thank you.
Sure. 100%. Well, we've come to the end of today's session. I do believe that this is one of those conversations that we do need to, revisit ever so often, until at least we can work towards some solutions that work for South Africans as well as non-South Africans. But I really want, I'm very impressed with the turnout of this conversation, and especially just from an educational perspective, it's always very important to know some of the challenges that face our neighboring countries, or that face our college mates and colleagues. So thank you very much to everybody who was able to join today's conversation, and to everybody who was able to contribute. Thank you, Tanvia and the ASRM. Thank you very much for your insights. There will be an article on the website coming this week from ASRM that will also serve as a nice educational piece to supplement the conversation that we've had today. If you do have any feedback or would like to communicate with ASRM, I will share their email address on my website later this week when I share the article. I'll also share their details on my social media platforms. So yeah, this conversation was recorded. It will be up on YouTube on my YouTube channel, which is, you'll just search Tebello Motshwane, but it will also be up on my Sisters in Conversation podcast. So yeah, everything here has been recorded, and you guys will all get a copy of it. Thank you to everybody who was able to join this year, this specific conversation. And I hope, early next year we can continue with this conversation. Final comment from
Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you. Muchengeti, you can make your final comment.
Thank you so much.
Yes, I just want to say thank you to everybody for allowing us platform. Thank you to you, Tebello. And I'd just like to take this opportunity also to express from the coalition's point of view our condolences to the Bezos family and the LRC family for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everybody.
I tell you now.
We will continue with the conversation offline, definitely. If anybody does want to contribute to this conversation in the form of an article or a post, you can even share your personal experience. I will definitely make it my point to share this on my social media pages. Thank you for all your time, guys. Bye.